Welcome to the Wing Wag. I'm your host, Jack O'Lynn. I'm an instrument-rated pilot and the owner of an aviation company and flight school here in Central Florida.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not guaranteed to be accurate or complete. While we research each topic, we are humans and occasionally make mistakes. For the most up-to-date information on regulations, check out the official Federal Aviation Regulations, also known as the FARs, or consult an aviation attorney. Lastly, the opinions expressed on this podcast are the guest's opinions and are not necessarily the opinions of the host or podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the Wing Wag. First of all, Happy New Year. If this is your first time watching an episode of the Wing Wag or listening, welcome. And if you've been with us for the last 3 months, thank you so much for continuing to listen to our podcast into 2026. One thing I do want to say, for those of you who have listened since the beginning, please let me know in the comments or whatever what kind of content you guys like to see. Are there any past episodes that you all really enjoyed? Are there other topics, aviation related, ideally, that you all would like to see? Because right now I'm basing the episodes just solely off of my interests, what I like to talk about with aviation, the conversations that I have with my brothers, for example, and I'd love to have your feedback. But since this is the new year, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my aviation-related New Year's resolutions. So normally I'm not too much of a fan of New Year's resolutions. I think that starting a new habit in January is generally not a good idea, especially like a fitness-related habit or a diet-related habit. It's coming off of Thanksgiving, New Year's, Christmas. January and February, March are kind of like desolate parts of the year, and you have to have a lot of willpower to create a new habit in January and then follow it through for that long. Despite all that, I think that where we are with Oland Aerospace in the podcast makes right now kind of an optimal time to talk about some new habits that we would like to form, that I would like to form. We're going through some changes at Oland Aerospace, which we'll talk about in a future episode. The podcast is coming up on 3 months, I believe. And most podcasts die within the first 3 months. So I think this is a natural kind of turning point, that this is going to be a long-term podcast and we need to start making some changes. And of course, I'll throw in some pilot-related New Year's resolutions, like how I want to improve as a pilot. So yeah, let's break this up into three categories. I'll talk about my pilot resolutions, how I want to fly better. I'll talk about my owner resolutions, how I want to be a better owner of the airplanes and a better owner of Oland Aerospace. And I'll talk about my podcast related resolutions, the things relating to the Wing Wag. So we'll start with the pilot related resolutions. The first thing that I would like to do is not be so lazy about flying. So a little bit of background. Where I live is almost directly between the two airplanes that we own. They're at different airports. One of them is 45 minutes to the north, and the other is like 30 or 35 minutes to the south. So quite the drive to go flying, especially when the best time to fly is early morning when there's no wind. And so I find myself having to wake up so early, 5 in the morning, 5:30, to get ready, get to the airport, pre-flight, everything, and then do my flight. And there are mornings, if I'm being honest, where I had planned to fly and then I just wake up and it's slightly cold or I'm slightly uncomfortable. I'm like, nope, going back to sleep. I'm not flying. This also encompasses, I want to start being more strict about my pre-flight planning, my cross-country planning. Sometimes I find myself, especially if it's like a perfect VFR day, I will just make up some flight that I want to do, click through the for-flight briefing pretty quickly, glance at the weather, make sure there's no TFRs around, and then call it a day, and then go and do my flight. I'd like to be more strict, more disciplined, actually plan out a route, pick an airport that I do want to go see, and actually take the time to understand the route, understand the en route weather, pay more attention to the briefing, things like this. And that kind of leads me into the next point. I would like to be a little bit more purposeful with my flying. So there's nothing wrong with going to the airport just to mess around in the airplane, do a couple laps in the pattern, go fly around, work on your maneuvers. That's totally fine to do. But at least every now and then, you have to have like an actual trip that you want to do. Like I said, go travel to a particular airport because you heard that they have a really good restaurant. Or do a weekend trip with your family. Or maybe you just want to go visit an airport because you heard it's cool, or they have a cool store, right? And so I think that would really improve my aviation life. Like making a list of airports I want to visit, trips I want to do in the airplane, and then figuring out how to make those happen. So that would involve planning, looking at weather, planning cross countries, and it would kind of get me back into the mindset that I had when I first started getting my pilot's license. That aviation was going to open so many doors for me. That it would become like my new mode of transportation. When the reality is I love flying and it's very fun, but it is not my new mode of transportation. I use my car more than ever, and only rarely do I actually like do a trip in the airplane. So I definitely want to do more of that. And then my last flying resolution is I want to fly more in some uncomfortable situations. And I'm not saying an unsafe situation, but an uncomfortable situation. So a couple of examples of this are flying. One of the airports that we fly out of has a skydiving company that goes out of there. And it always makes me so nervous flying when the skydivers are going up, even though the guy that flies the plane makes radio calls all the time, like alerting all the planes around the status of the skydivers. Like obviously you can see him take off, and then he'll say like, okay, dropping the skydivers in the pattern in 5 minutes, whatever. And then he'll say like, okay, skydivers in the pattern in 2 minutes, skydivers in the pattern, airplanes stay away. And then like all the skydivers on the ground, you're good to go. And then the process repeats. So it's completely safe if you're following what he's telling you. But for some reason, it makes me so nervous to the point where there are times when if I see the skydiver, if I know that the skydiving plane is about to go, I'll just come back and land because I don't want to deal with it. Or I'll fly somewhere else and then wait until the skydivers are done before I come back in. But it's really just not that big of a deal. There's a couple of other situations. Sometimes if I go to practice at an untowered airport near a flight school and the pattern is just full of students, that also makes me kind of nervous, like trying to fit myself into the pattern, even though like they all have ADS-B, I have ADS-B in, so I can see where they all are. I'm listening to the radio, I can hear them, I'm making my own calls. Like I know everything's gonna be fine, but again, it just makes me nervous. I also need to practice landing with a crosswind that's like closer to my personal limit. So for tailwheel, crosswinds are a lot more important than they are in a nose wheel airplane. And so I've set my personal crosswind limit around 6 knots in the tailwheel. And but that 6 knots does make me uncomfortable. But I do need to practice my crosswinds. I can't just keep lowering my limit. I do need to eventually get better at these things. So I want to start flying more when the crosswind is getting close to 6 knots, so I can improve that and maybe one day increase that limit. So there will always be uncomfortable moments in flying, but there is something to be said for making yourself fly in them every now and then, as long as you're doing it safely. And I personally think that can really improve your skills as a pilot. So I'd like to do a little bit of that. So next we'll talk about how I want to improve as an airplane and flight school owner. So the first thing I want to do is I want to be more involved in the maintenance of our airplanes. So normally for maintenance items, I defer to my brother Matthew because he's way more knowledgeable about these things, and he has lots of contacts at various avionics shops around the area, and he just knows tons of people, and he knows a lot of things. And so it makes sense for us to lean on him a little bit for this. But Matthew may not always be available. And so we need at least someone else who's comfortable handling these things, diagnosing a problem in the airplane, knowing who to contact to get it fixed, and arranging for the transportation for the plane to wherever it's getting fixed. Like for example, we were having an issue in the 170 with the intercom lately, like cutting in and out. And so we had recently had some radio work done at an avionics shop in Fort Pierce. So Matthew called the shop, explained what was going on, like went back and forth with them, did some research on the Garmin website, and then like scheduled a time for them. And he ferried the plane down to Fort Pierce himself. And so basically that whole situation was handled by Matthew. And so I got to thinking, like, if Matthew hadn't handled it, I would have just stumbled my way through because I'm not sure what to do. So I definitely want to start becoming more involved in that aspect of owning the plane, not just flying it. On a related note, I also want to wash the planes more. I do know how to wash the planes. I'm an expert at washing planes and sweeping hangars. But I want to get on a more clear schedule. Like, instead of just waiting until the planes are so dirty or the hangar is so dirty before going to wash it, I want to have a schedule set in stone. Like, okay, every month or every 2 weeks, I go and I wash this plane. And then 2 weeks later, I wash this plane, or every week. Who knows? I'll need to think about that. But basically just keeping the planes like clean and presentable for ourselves and for our students. Especially because like when you fly into a pancake breakfast or a restaurant or something and you have like a really shiny, clean looking plane, it looks really nice and people appreciate it. And not that they like hate on you for having a dirty plane, but I really love that feeling of having a plane that everyone wants to look at and be proud of that. So I definitely want to be more regular about keeping the planes that way. And the last goal that I have as an owner of the flight school in particular is I want to expand Oland Aerospace. Obviously, it's a company we started and I want to see it be successful. So I want to start looking for how to hire new instructors, how to get new students, how can we expand our offering. Obviously, I'll work with my other brothers, Hunter and Matthew, on this, but it's something that I kind of want to spearhead and push forward, and I think I can do a decent job with this. My last set of resolutions have to do with this podcast, the Wing Wag. So I'm really enjoying making this podcast. It's a lot of fun to sit down and research a topic and then speak about it, and it kind of forces you to organize your thoughts. It kind of reminds me of, I used to be a teaching assistant in college, and it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And I miss teaching, and this at least gives me a similar feeling. But there's definitely ways we can improve this podcast. The first thing I want to do is be a little bit more organized about how we're coming up with ideas and researching them and recording them. So the way I'm doing it now is I just think of an idea, look it up, write some notes in this notebook, and then record whenever I have time. And then sometimes I find myself recording late at night the day before my wife needs to edit, and then she has to spend the whole day editing just to have it out by the time it's supposed to go out. So I'd like to set up some sort of like content calendar where I set the recording days ahead of time with some topic ideas and some guest ideas. And then I have like scheduled blocks of time before for like brainstorming new episode ideas, reaching out to possible guests, researching and writing down my notes. I also want to just improve the content, obviously. I want to improve the way that I'm speaking in my delivery of the content, my research. And I also want to do content that you guys, the audience, actually want to see. I want to have more guests on who have interesting stories, and I want to pick topics that are just interesting, obviously. I don't want to talk about boring stuff, but there are some things that I think are interesting that maybe no one else does. So yeah, I guess I can also say I want to be more like in tune with the audience, what they want to see, what you all want to see. And that's why I want a little bit of your feedback. So yeah, I think that's about it for my aviation and podcast New Year's resolutions. But what kind of resolutions do you all have related to aviation, hopefully? Are you looking to get a pilot's license? Are you looking to improve the way that you fly? Looking to just fly a little bit more? Yeah, let me know. And have a great start to your year. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Wing Wag. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing. And if you're out flying today, make sure to give somebody a wing wag.